Story 1. It was a small, quiet town, blanketed in snow on Christmas Eve. Residents were inside, cozy with their families, when a sudden power outage spread through the area. In one house, a man named Tom was preparing to head out and finish his last-minute Christmas shopping. But as he put on his boots by the front door, he noticed something strange in the snow outside. Footprints, large, muddy, leading right up to his door, and then stopping. There were no prints leading away, only those leading right up to his porch and disappearing. Tom felt a chill but brushed it off, thinking it must have been a prank or a trick of the light. The snow was falling heavier now, but those prints, they were strange. The footprints were large and uneven, like they had been made by someone with an odd gait or dragging something heavy. And stranger yet, there seemed to be scratch marks beside them. He went back inside, locking the door, but he couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Hours passed, and as the night grew darker, Tom decided to take another look outside. This time, he noticed something else. Strange symbols carved into the snow near his porch, like markings or symbols in an unfamiliar language. They were freshly made, and now his curiosity and fear were at odds. He called the local police to report the incident. An officer arrived, looking concerned, as Tom showed him the prints and symbols. The officer suggested that it might be some teens playing pranks, or maybe some animals dragging branches, but Tom knew better. This felt intentional, like he was being watched. Later that night, he lay awake, watching the snow fall outside. Just as he was about to drift off, he heard a creak on the porch. He sat up, his heart pounding, listening as the creaks turned into footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching the snow beneath. He didn't dare move, but he strained to hear. Finally, after what felt like hours, the sound faded. In the morning, Tom opened the door to see fresh footprints again, this time leading from his bedroom window to the door. And on the porch, he found something chilling. A note with a message scribbled in shaky handwriting. "I am the shadow in the snow. Merry Christmas." He looked around, seeing no sign of the intruder, but the message stayed burned in his mind. For every Christmas after, Tom would find strange footprints around his home, reminding him of the shadow that haunted his Christmas Eve. Story 2. Every Christmas, Sarah's grandmother would give her a new doll for her collection. They were always handcrafted and looked beautiful, though Sarah thought some were a bit eerie with their glassy eyes and painted smiles. That Christmas, she received a particularly strange doll, a Victorian-style girl with an old-fashioned dress, her hair curled and pinned up, and wide blue eyes that seemed almost too lifelike. When Sarah asked about the doll's unusual appearance, her grandmother seemed hesitant and just muttered, "This one is special." She didn't elaborate, and Sarah didn't ask. That night, Sarah set the doll on her bedside table, but she couldn't shake the feeling that those glassy eyes were watching her. In the middle of the night, she woke up to a soft creak in her room. She glanced over to the doll, and in the dim light, she could swear its head had turned slightly, its eyes now facing her. Sarah told herself she was imagining things and went back to sleep. But every night, she'd wake up to the same thing, the doll's head facing a different direction, or its expression seeming just a bit more intense, almost angry. One night, she decided to put the doll in her closet, hoping that out of sight would mean out of mind. But that night, she awoke to the same creak, only louder. When she opened her eyes, she was horrified. The doll was back on her nightstand, looking directly at her, a small note pinned to its dress. "Why did you lock me away?" Sarah was terrified and ran to her grandmother's room. Her grandmother looked at her with a sad expression and explained that the doll was said to carry a spirit. an old family ghost that visited children who needed protection. But to Sarah, the doll didn't feel protective. It felt angry. She tried throwing the doll away, but it would always reappear, on her bed or her dresser, staring at her with those lifelike blue eyes. Eventually, Sarah accepted the doll was with her for good. She kept it in a glass case, hoping that might contain whatever spirit haunted it. Years later, she found out that the doll was part of a dark family tradition. A doll passed down to remind each child of a forgotten spirit who'd once been part of the family. Someone who felt abandoned and now spent eternity watching over each new generation. It wasn't comforting, but a reminder that some gifts come with a price. Story 3. The Parker family had just moved into an old Victorian house, hoping to spend their first Christmas in the new place with friends and family. The house had charm and history, and they loved it, even though it was a bit eerie in its age. On Christmas Eve, the family sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa, talking about their plans for the next day. Just as they were getting ready for bed, they heard a strange noise coming from the chimney, a rustling, scratching sound, like something was stuck inside. Mr. Parker assumed it was a bird, or maybe a squirrel that had found its way in. But as he approached the fireplace, the sound grew louder, almost like someone was breathing heavily inside. He pulled back, disturbed, but decided he'd check in the morning. Throughout the night, the noises continued. Around midnight, the sounds turned into faint whispers, as if someone was muttering just below the chimney flue. The family was unnerved, but chalked it up to the old house settling. But their dog started barking at the fireplace, scratching at the bricks, and growling at something unseen. In the morning, Mr. Parker decided to clear out the chimney, hoping to remove whatever was causing the commotion. As he began to clear away the debris, he found something that made his blood run cold, a single charred shoe buried among the ashes. But when he dug deeper, he found more. Bones, small and cracked, wedged between the bricks. The police were called, and the house was examined. They discovered that the previous owner's son, a troubled young man, had gone missing years ago on Christmas Eve. It was believed he'd run away. Until now. After the discovery, strange things began happening in the house. The whispering sounds grew louder, and shadows seemed to flicker around the fireplace every night, almost like the silhouette of a man trapped in the chimney, struggling to escape. The family could no longer stand the sounds, the whispers, and the presence that felt heavier each night. They eventually left, abandoning the house and all its dark history. But they warned the next owners, don't light the fireplace on Christmas Eve, because if you do, you might hear the whispers too, the voice of a spirit who was trapped, waiting and watching, forever bound to the chimney of his childhood home.